There are some people born into darkness, and then there are those who choose it, who wrap themselves in it like a second skin, who breathe it in until it saturates their lungs, their blood, the very architecture of their thoughts, until darkness and self become one. Bellatrix Black was not born a monster. She was born into one of the oldest, darkest families in the wizarding world, a family whose name alone could silence a room. But plenty of blacks rejected that legacy. Sirius ran, tore himself free, and never looked back. Andromeda chose love, walked away from everything for a Muggleborn's hand. Even Regulus, in the end, died trying to do the right thing. Bellatrix did something else. She became exactly what her family wanted. Ah, greetings, traveler. You've found your way back to the Silver Quill Corner. I am Grayfen, the Story Keeper. This is the life of Bellatrix Lestrange. "1951, they named her Bellatrix, first daughter of Cygnus and Druella Black. The House of Black didn't stand, it loomed. Stone so dark it seemed to drink the light itself, curtains thick as coffin lids, strangling every window, and the portraits, God, the portraits, dead eyes in gilded frames, tracking your every move down corridors that never ended, watching, judging, hungry. This house taught Bellatrix what it meant to carry their family name in her veins. And in that house, pure blood supremacy was everything, stitched into every tapestry, breathed over breakfast like prayer, drilled into her skull with every lesson, every punishment, every whispered bedtime story. Muggles, filth, less than animals. Muggleborns, thieves, parasites clutching stolen magic in their hands. Blood traders were something worse, something unforgivable. She absorbed these truths before she could even read, before she knew what magic felt like in her fingertips. She was the eldest, the first, the blueprint her sisters would be measured against. She didn't flinch when Creature was punished. She didn't look away either. She watched, quiet and attentive, absorbing the lesson the way other children absorbed table manners. 2 younger sisters followed her into that house of horrors. Andromeda, 2 years younger, quieter, softer around the edges. Like clay, their mother kept trying to fire into stone. But something gentle lived in her, something their mother couldn't kill, no matter how hard she tried. Then Narcissa, the youngest, blonde, beautiful, those sharp eyes absorbing everything. Already learning that a well-timed smile could draw more blood than any curse. That silence could be the sharpest weapon of all. The Black Sisters, 3 girls who'd grow into 3 infamous women, each carving her own dark legacy into history. But back then, they were just children trapped in a house that demanded perfection and rationed love like wartime bread, conditional, measured, always just beyond your reach. Bellatrix thrived. She memorized their family tree like scripture, could recite their lineage back through the centuries, knew which bloodlines deserved respect, which deserved contempt. Magic came to her early, wild, violent bursts of accidental power that made her parents exchange knowing looks across the dinner table. And when magic exploded out of her, she never apologized, never showed one flicker of remorse. Why would she? She was a Black. But Andromeda, poor Andromeda tried. She wanted to be what they demanded, but something inside her just wouldn't break. She made the fatal mistake of asking questions. Why fear Muggles if we're so much more powerful? Why hoard magic from people born without pure blood? Dangerous questions, the kind that made their mother's face go cold, made their father's jaw clench with disappointment. The kind that made Bellatrix's lip curl back in disgust. Weak. Narcissa learned to play a different game entirely. She learned to observe, to become a mirror, reflecting whoever held power in the room, to smile, to agree, to lock her real thoughts behind that porcelain face. Even then she understood. Survival meant becoming invisible. 3 sisters, 1 toxic house, the same poison poured into each of their veins. The letter came on her 11th birthday. The owl arrived during breakfast. Heavy parchment sealed with emerald wax, the Hogwarts crest pressed into it like a brand. Her mother read it aloud, voice dripping with quiet pride. Of course her daughter would attend Hogwarts. Of course she'd be exceptional. Of course she'd be sorted into Slytherin. No black had ever been anything else. Not yet, anyway. For now, Bellatrix prepared for her destiny. New robes tailored to perfection. New books with pristine spines. A wand from Ollivander's that practically flew into her palm. The connection instant, electric, inevitable. September 1st arrived. Platform 9 3/4, King's Cross Station. That shimmering barrier between platforms that separated their world from the mundane. The Hogwarts Express gleamed scarlet against the platform, beautiful and waiting. Her parents gave their final instructions. Uphold the family name. Remember who you are. Remember what you are. Bellatrix nodded. She didn't need the reminder. She boarded the train, found a compartment already occupied by familiar faces, pure-blood children from her parents' exclusive circle, confident, self-assured, absolutely certain of their rightful place. The train pulled away from London, racing north toward Scotland, toward Hogwarts, toward everything, and Bellatrix smiled. This was where it would truly begin, where she'd stop being just another black daughter, where she'd become something greater. The train surged forward. Bellatrix went with it. Ready. The sorting ceremony was pure theatre. Bellatrix stood among the other first years, terrified 11-year-olds staring up at the great hall with their eyes wide open, full of excitement. Black Bellatrix. She walked to the stool, head high, spine rigid, every inch a black. The sorting hat dropped onto her head, and inside her mind it saw everything. Ambition sharp as a silver blade, certainty hard as iron, hunger for power already vast, already metastasizing. No doubt, no fear, no hesitation whatsoever. The hat barely touched her thoughts before it screamed, "Slytherin!" The word exploded through the hall. The Slytherin table erupted, applause, approval, welcoming roars. Bellatrix crossed to her house, not sorted, claimed. This was where she belonged, the house founded by Salazar Slytherin himself, the house that valued ambition, cunning, and blood. Not just where she'd been placed, where she was finally understood, where she would become what she was always meant to be. Magic obeyed her will. Charms bent to her will like beaten dogs. Transfiguration surrendered. Potions rewarded her obsessive precision with results that were perfect, elegant, and lethal. But defense against the dark arts, that was where her heart lived. She mastered every defensive spell in weeks. The library held answers, not just in the common stacks where students revised for exams or whispered about dangerous spells they would never dare attempt. Bellatrix lingered. Her fingers traced margins filled with warnings, footnotes about curses best left theoretical, magic that bent wills, magic that broke them, the unforgivable curses, illegal, forbidden, punishable by life in Azkaban. Slughorn invited her to his Slug Club, those exclusive gatherings for the talented and well-connected. She accepted, not for the crystallized pineapple or tedious small talk, for connections, because connections meant power, and power meant everything. But it wasn't her talent that defined those years at Hogwarts. It was how she wielded it. She was cruel, strategically. She chose her victims the way a predator chooses prey, students who couldn't defend themselves, those without powerful families to seek revenge, usually Muggle-borns. The damage never came openly, a spell cast in an abandoned corridor, a humiliation orchestrated to look like pure accident, A rumor whispered into exactly the right ear at exactly the right moment. She cultivated followers, other Slytherins drawn to her charisma and her complete, bone-chilling absence of guilt. Purebloods from families like hers, wealthy, raised from birth to believe their superiority was objective truth, not opinion. They became her inner circle. She ruled them with charm and quiet, unspoken threat. Cross her? Face consequences. Never immediately, that would be too obvious, too crude. But eventually, a week later, a month later, when you'd almost forgotten your transgression, then it would come. Fear became a language. Bellatrix spoke it like a native. In her final years, she met Rodolphus Lestrange, older, Slytherin, from another ancient pureblood dynasty, as old as the Blacks, as dark as the Blacks. The match was perfect, on paper. Both families approved enthusiastically. The bloodlines aligned beautifully. The values matched like puzzle pieces. She accepted his courtship from logic. He admired her. She saw a business arrangement, a strategic alliance, a stepping stone to greater things. The understanding between them was unspoken and brutally transactional. Her parents were thrilled. The Lestranges were powerful, respectable, devoted to the old ways. Bellatrix wore his ring. By her final year at Hogwarts, whispers had started circulating through the right circles. A wizard rising in the shadows, someone who believed what she believed, that blood was everything, that power belonged to those ruthless enough to take it. She left Hogwarts in 1969. She graduated absolutely certain of one thing. The world beyond those castle walls wouldn't be gentle, and neither would she. Teachers gave their final speeches about responsibility, restraint, choosing light over darkness. Bellatrix smiled politely, dismissed every single word. The world was changing. The whispers were growing into roars. Dark wizards were gathering, pure bloods choosing sides. And Bellatrix Black was ready. That summer, she married Rodolphus Lestrange. She stood beside him, spoke the ancient vows, bound herself by magic and name, felt absolutely nothing. The marriage gave her what actually mattered: independence, her own household, access to new circles. The Lestranges moved in circles where whispers of the Dark Lord weren't whispers anymore. They were declarations. Rodolphus was loyal, devoted. But Bellatrix's devotion, her obsession, belonged to someone else, someone she hadn't even met yet. They called him the Dark Lord, a name spoken in hushed tones, with fear, with reverence, with worship. Lord Voldemort. He'd been gathering followers, quietly at first, then with terrifying confidence. He preached what Bellatrix had absorbed, that blood was sacred, that magic should dominate, that weakness deserved annihilation. But Voldemort didn't just preach pretty philosophies. He acted, attacks, disappearances, bodies. The ministry dithered, debated, failed pathetically. Voldemort's influence spread like plague, and Bellatrix was desperate to be part of it. Wizards who'd sworn absolute loyalty, who concealed themselves behind masks and executed his will without mercy or question. They called themselves Death Eaters. She met him during the early years of his rise to power. Young, newly married, already starving for something more. Voldemort didn't rely on spectacle or grand gestures. He relied on presence, raw power that flooded every corner of the room and made it crystal clear who commanded absolute authority. He spoke of his vision, a world remade through strength, decisive action where the ministry only cowered and debated. And Bellatrix understood. Everything she'd been carefully molded into, finally given form, given purpose, given direction. Her devotion didn't belong to her husband, didn't belong to her family name, it belonged to him. She pledged herself without hesitation, accepted the dark mark, seared into her forearm, permanent and magically binding. From that moment forward, Bellatrix Lestrange existed for one single purpose: to serve. She discovered her true calling almost immediately: torture, The Cruciatus curse had obsessed her since Hogwarts, one of the unforgivables, a spell that didn't kill but shattered, pure, perfect, incomprehensible pain. To cast it required genuine intent, real, visceral desire to cause suffering. Most wizards couldn't manage it, even Death Eaters, even those who considered themselves dark and powerful. Bellatrix could. Where others hesitated, she focused. Where others flinched back, she leaned closer. Her victims screamed until their voices shattered, begged until words lost meaning, broke like glass. She never stopped. Other Death Eaters noticed. Some were impressed. Others were deeply unsettled. Her reputation spread like wildfire through both sides of the war. When cruelty was required, she was the first one summoned, and she came eagerly, wand gripped tight, dark eyes blazing, that terrifying smile dancing across her lips. She never hesitated, never showed mercy, never stopped until she'd extracted everything she needed, or until there was simply nothing left to break. Her victims blurred into one screaming mass, blood traitors, Order members, anyone unfortunate enough to obstruct the Dark Lord's path. Because to Bellatrix, torture was art, the way she could sustain the curse just long enough to fragment a mind but keep the victim conscious. The way she could extract classified information between agonized screams. The way she could identify a breaking point and push past it. Beautiful in its horrifying way. The Dark Lord noticed. He trusted her where he considered others unreliable. Where some Death Eaters hesitated or merely postured, Bellatrix delivered. Her devotion intensified. Every act of cruelty became an offering. Every scream became a prayer. Then Andromeda destroyed everything. Married Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born. The betrayal was absolute, unforgivable. How dare she betray everything they were, their blood, their legacy, their name, for love. The concept was pathetic, weakness incarnate. Love was a bedtime story for fools who couldn't comprehend real power. Bellatrix returned home, found her mother already burning Andromeda's name from the family tapestry, threads blackening, smoking, curling into ash. Years later, Sirius would join those scorched, erased marks. But this was fundamentally different. Sirius rejected their ideology, chose Gryffindor, fled to the Potters like a coward. Andromeda had betrayed their blood itself, polluted herself permanently, obliterated any legitimate claim to the Black name. Andromeda Black was dead. If they ever met again, Bellatrix would treat her exactly like any other blood traitor, with her wand raised and that cold smile on her face. Andromeda had made her choice, and Bellatrix had made hers. The war exploded. Isolated attacks transformed into open warfare. Death Eaters striking in broad daylight. Homes burning. The dark mark hovering above their victims like a promise or a threat. The Ministry scrambled pathetically, always 3 steps behind, because Voldemort was brilliant, strategic. He'd planted spies in every department, knew their plans before they'd even finalized them. Bellatrix was right in the center of the carnage, killing without 1 second of hesitation, torturing for information and for pure, dark pleasure. Her reputation metastasized, whispered in terror by those opposing the Dark Lord, spoken with grudging respect by fellow Death Eaters. Bellatrix Lestrange, the Dark Lord's chosen, his most lethal weapon. Beautiful and deadly, brilliant and completely, utterly mad. Because that's what she was becoming, mad. Not from trauma or grief, but from total willing surrender to darkness. When cruelty transformed into ecstasy, when pain became high art, when other human beings stopped registering as human at all. She laughed constantly now, during battles, during torture sessions, at completely inappropriate moments. High, cold, bone-chilling laughter that made even hardened Death Eaters uncomfortable. She took insane risks, pushed every boundary, did things even other Death Eaters considered excessive. Voldemort never stopped her, because she was effective. By 1980, her name meant pure terror. Not famous, Death Eaters operated in shadows, concealed behind masks, kept identities carefully hidden. But among those who knew, among those fighting on both sides, her name carried weight. She was 29, peak of her power, confident, devoted, dangerous. Each kill a gift laid at the Dark Lord's feet, each scream absolute proof of loyalty. Rodolphus was still there, still technically her husband, still following her into every battle. But their marriage was empty formality, convenient arrangement, nothing more. They shared a house, shared a name, wore identical dark marks, but there was no love between them. There never had been. Bellatrix's love, if that twisted obsession could be called love, belonged entirely, completely to Voldemort. Obsessive, possessive, all-consuming, unhealthy. She thought about him every waking moment, dreamed about him at night, lived for those rare moments he'd acknowledge her work, praise her occasionally in his cold, distant way. That recognition was all she needed. Not Rodolphus's affection, not wealth or social status or power in her own name, just him, his approval, his trust, his acknowledgement that she was worthy of his attention. It was absolute obsession. She saw it as divine purpose, as meaning. The world was about to transform, victorious, perfect, his. And then, October 31st, 1981, Halloween, a night that should have been their victory celebration, the dawn of their new world order. Instead, it became the night everything shattered into pieces. Bellatrix didn't know at first. She'd been on assignment, terrorizing blood traitors in the countryside, making brutal examples, spreading fear like a disease. She returned in the early hours of November 1st, exhausted, exhilarated, robes still splattered and stained with the night's violent work, ready to kneel before him, to present another flawlessly executed mission. But something was wrong. The other Death Eaters were gathering, whispering frantically, voices urgent, panicked, terrified. She grabbed one by his robes, demanded answers. He stared at her, eyes wide as dinner plates, absolutely terrified, and told her the impossible. The Dark Lord had gone to Godric's Hollow to kill the Potter boy, but when he'd cast the killing curse at the baby, the curse rebounded. Voldemort was gone, destroyed, vanished, his power scattered to nothing, gone. Bellatrix didn't believe it. Impossible. Absolutely unthinkable. The Dark Lord was the most powerful wizard who'd ever existed. This had to be a trick, a test, an elaborate ruse to expose traitors and cowards. But the hours crawled past. He didn't return. The dark mark seared into her arm, which had always burned warm, connecting her directly to him, was cold, silent, empty. Other Death Eaters began fleeing into the night, disappearing like rats, claiming they'd been under the Imperious curse, that they'd never truly supported him, that they'd been forced against their will. Cowards, liars. Bellatrix didn't flee. She stood there as her entire world collapsed, as everything she'd built, everything she'd believed in, everything she'd become crumbled into meaningless ash, and felt something she'd never truly experienced before. Despair, deep, devastating, soul-destroying, and she was completely, utterly alone. But no, she crushed that despair almost instantly, buried it, replaced it with something harder, more dangerous, denial. He wasn't gone. He couldn't be gone. Too powerful, too brilliant, too inevitable. This was temporary, a setback, an obstacle to overcome. He would return. He had to return. Because if he didn't, if he was truly gone forever, then what was she? What had all of this been for? The countless murders, the pain she'd inflicted, the blood permanently staining her hands, all meaningless if he was truly gone. She refused to accept it. The Dark Lord would return. She believed it with every fiber of her being, every drop of blood in her veins. And when he did return, he would need his most faithful servant waiting for him. Bellatrix went hunting with Rodolphus, Rabastan, and Barty Crouch Jr., 4 Death Eaters stalking answers through the dark, desperate, and utterly devoted to a cause that seemed already lost. needing to know what happened at Godric's Hollow, what the prophecy meant, how their lord had fallen, and how to bring him back. Dumbledore would know. But Dumbledore was untouchable. So they hunted someone in the Order, someone close to the Potters, and so the targets became Frank and Alice Longbottom, Order members who had defied Voldemort 3 times and lived. They would know something. Bellatrix found them, then struck. Near midnight, they shattered the wards. Frank Longbottom fought well, powerful, brave, throwing shields and casting every defensive spell he knew. But it was 4 against 2. They brought them down, bound them, dragged them into their own living room. Frank and Alice Longbottom, young and defiant even with fear in their eyes. She stood over them with her wand loose in her hand. "Where is he?" Frank refused. Bellatrix laughed. She didn't need mercy. She needed their secrets. "Crucio!" Frank screamed. His body convulsed as Bellatrix held the curse longer than necessary. She let it drop. Asked again. He gave the same answer. So she cast again. Alice begged her to stop, offered herself instead. Bellatrix turned to her and smiled. How generous! She poured herself into the curse, every second of agony an offering to the Dark Lord, but the void didn't answer. Alice's screams went on until her voice broke. Rodolphus told her to stop, so she kept going, switching between them until there was nothing left to break. Frank and Alice sat slumped, breathing but empty. Bellatrix lowered her wand and felt nothing. She'd destroyed them. It changed nothing. Behind her, the others were silent. She turned away and left them on the floor. Their grandmother would find them at dawn. They would be taken to St. Mungo's. Their son would visit them someday, treasuring the sweet wrappers they'd give him. Auras came within hours. They fought, but numbers won. Chains locked around her wrists. Bellatrix did not resist. The courtroom overflowed. Charges rolled out. Unforgivable curses, torture, destruction of Frank and Alice Longbottom. The evidence was damning. She stood with chains rattling. She laughed. She was proud. She would do it all again. The verdict came swift. Guilty. They led her away. The Dark Lord would return. She would be waiting. Azkaban rose from the North Sea, black stone, Dementors. This was where Bellatrix would die. Stone walls wept with damp. The cold settled into bone. Dementors glided past. Most prisoners broke quickly. Bellatrix did not. The Dementors fed on regret. Bellatrix felt none. They took warmth. They could not touch her faith. He would return. So she endured. Prisoners screamed. Some went quiet. Rodolphus was somewhere in the prison. Bellatrix grew thin, but her eyes burned with certainty. He will return. The wizarding world moved on. Some Death Eaters walked free, but some remained in Azkaban. Bellatrix waited. She heard his name. Harry Potter was alive. The injustice twisted inside her, but it was temporary. When the Dark Lord returned, Harry would die, and Bellatrix would see it. 14 years. The dark mark burned. He was back. She pressed her hand to the mark. She laughed. She had been right. The escape came in January 1996. 10 Death Eaters freed. The Dementors sided with the Dark Lord. Bellatrix stepped into the cold night air. She was free. She saw him again. Lord Voldemort. Different. Monstrous. Beautiful because it was him. She dropped to her knees. You stayed faithful, Bellatrix. Always. He commanded her to rise. There is work to be done, and you will help me do it. The war began again. Bellatrix was given missions immediately. She succeeded. Azkaban had sharpened her. She struck Order safe houses. She tortured for information. The Cruciatus felt natural. Her wand fit perfectly in her hand. She laughed. It was intoxicating. Lucius Malfoy had never seen Azkaban. He had denied the Dark Lord, yet he was valued. Draco Malfoy, Lucius and Narcissa's son, Bellatrix's nephew, 16 years old with pale aristocratic features and those cold grey eyes. The Dark Lord had given him an impossible mission wrapped in exquisite cruelty, punishment for his father's failures. Kill Albus Dumbledore. 16 years old, commanded to murder the most powerful wizard in Britain. It was brilliant, the Dark Lord moving his pieces across the board, placing them where they'd either triumph or be obliterated. Narcissa came to Bellatrix terrified, begging for help, for protection. Bellatrix looked at her sister with mingled pity and contempt. So this was maternal love, this desperate clawing fear, this weakness that made you beg. Pathetic, but useful. The Dark Lord had approved her involvement. She met Draco at Malfoy Manor in the drawing room where fear hung in the air like expensive perfume. This boy, this child expected to kill Dumbledore. He was terrified beneath his attempts at bravery, raised in luxury, untouched by real suffering, utterly unprepared. She trained him ruthlessly, occlumency, dark spells, curses, methods of killing that left no trail. She was exacting, thorough, demanding, because everything done for the Dark Lord had to be perfect. She saw it in his eyes, the hesitation, the fear, the decency he couldn't quite bury, and she knew he would fail. She didn't tell Narcissa, let her cling to hope, believe preparation might save him. It was kinder than the truth. Draco was too soft for the world they were creating. But someone else occupied her thoughts, made her jaw clench and her wand hand twitch. Severus Snape. Potions Master, Death Eater, the Dark Lord's most trusted servant who'd spent 13 years at Dumbledore's side and returned the moment he was called. And the Dark Lord trusted him completely, gave him vital tasks, confided in him, relied on him. Bellatrix hated it. She'd never trusted Snape. Something about him didn't fit. He'd played double agent too perfectly, too convincingly. What if that performance had never stopped? What if his loyalty now was the lie? She'd voiced her concerns once, carefully, privately, kneeling before the Dark Lord. Voldemort had listened, then told her, cold and absolute, that Severus Snape had proven his loyalty, that questioning Snape was questioning his own judgment. The rebuke was gentle, but it burned. She wanted to be his most trusted, his most valued, and Snape stood in her way. So she watched him constantly, waiting for the slip, the fracture, the proof of betrayal. She never found it. Snape was too careful, too controlled, too perfect. But without proof, without permission, she could do nothing except let him know she was watching, waiting. One mistake was all she needed. The Dark Lord orchestrated it perfectly. A vision planted in Harry Potter's mind, the boy lured to the Ministry to rescue Sirius Black, who was never there, never in danger, a trap. Bellatrix was part of the team sent to retrieve the prophecy. She apparated into the Ministry with a dozen other Death Eaters, masked, robed, ready, and then chaos erupted. Harry Potter and his friends appearing like sacrificial lambs, barely trained, hopelessly outmatched. The battle tore through the Department of Mysteries, prophecies shattering like crystal rain, spells colliding, magic thick enough to taste. Bellatrix fought with pure joy. This was what she was made for, chaos and combat and the exquisite thrill of the hunt. She laughed as she cast, laughed when they dodged, laughed harder when they didn't. Then the Order arrived, and among them, Sirius Black. Her cousin, the disgrace of the family, the one who'd chosen Gryffindor, light and betrayal. They dueled, black against black. He was better than she expected. Azkaban should have broken him, but he fought like someone protecting what he loved. Harry Potter, his godson. She taunted him as they fought, mocked his dead friends, his wasted life, his pathetic choices, and he laughed, joked, smiled, refused to take her seriously. It enraged her beyond reason. She cast the spell, red light, fast, precise, striking his chest. Surprise flashed across his face as he fell backward through the veil, the archway whispering with voices of the dead, and then he was gone. Bellatrix stood breathing hard, wand raised. Had she meant to kill him? It didn't matter. He was dead, her cousin, her blood, the last Black who'd chosen light, dead. She laughed, that wild, high sound echoing through the chamber. She had killed Sirius Black. Harry Potter screamed, tried to follow, and Remus Lupin held him back as he thrashed and sobbed. Bellatrix drank it in. This grief, this agony she had caused, just as Harry had destroyed what she loved. It felt like justice, like balance, like poetry written in blood. There was no time to savor it. Dumbledore arrived and everything changed. The old wizard with his silver beard and half-moon spectacles, power radiating from him like heat, dismantling Death Eaters almost casually with barely a gesture. Bellatrix ran, not from fear but because she couldn't serve the Dark Lord from a cell. Harry Potter followed, 15 years old, eyes blazing with rage, pain, and grief, hurling clumsy, powerful spells fueled by raw emotion. She laughed and dodged, cast curses back, toyed with him. "Come on, you can do better than that," she called, sing-song and delighted. She could have killed him, ended everything, but it wasn't her kill. The Dark Lord would want Harry Potter for himself. So she ran and laughed and told him about Sirius, how easily he'd fallen, how meaningless his death had been. Free, alive. She'd killed Sirius Black, fought in the Department of Mysteries, and the Dark Lord himself had come for her. In her mind, it was perfect. The war escalated. 1997, the year everything came to a head. The Ministry fell in a single night. Rufus Scrimgeour murdered. Pious Thickness installed as puppet minister under the Imperious Curse. The Death Eaters controlled everything, laws, auras, power itself. Muggleborns were hunted, blood traitors scattered, resistance fragmenting into desperate shadows. Bellatrix reveled in it. This was the world she'd waited for, suffered for. She carried out her work with ruthless efficiency, her name whispered in terror even by other Death Eaters who feared what she'd become. She was devoted, consumed. Malfoy Manor transformed into a staging ground, a prison. The drawing room that once hosted formal dinners now held prisoners in chains, blood-staining floors no house elf could scrub clean. Narcissa flinched at screams, avoided certain rooms. Lucius endured it diminished, his wand taken, reduced from lieutenant to barely tolerated host. Bellatrix enjoyed that, perhaps more than she should. Then snatchers came dragging prisoners, and among them Harry Potter. His face was swollen, disfigured by a stinging jinx. Barely recognizable. Was it really him? The snatchers thought so, but weren't certain. Bellatrix studied them. The boy, a Weasley, a curly-haired girl. Then she saw it. The sword of Gryffindor, goblin-made, ancient, powerful. It should have been in her vault, locked behind Gringotts' strongest wards. Unless they'd been in her vault, unless they'd stolen from her, unless they'd found the Horcrux. Real panic flooded her, sharp, immediate, suffocating. Hufflepuff's cup, the Dark Lord's Horcrux. If they'd taken it, if he discovered she'd failed, she grabbed the girl, threw her to the floor. "Where did you get the sword? How did you enter my vault? What did you take?" The girl refused to answer, defiant, even in terror. Wrong answer. Bellatrix carved the word into the girl's arm with her knife. Mudblood. Letter by letter, slow, deliberate. The girl screamed, thrashed, bled, but didn't break. So Bellatrix used the Cruciatus curse. "Crucio!" The girl convulsed, every nerve on fire. Bellatrix held the curse, demanded answers between waves of pain. "The vault, the sword, what else did you take?" The girl sobbed but stayed silent on what mattered. Brave, stupidly brave. Bellatrix cast again and again. She needed answers, needed to know if the Horcrux was safe, and she enjoyed it. The power, the control, the screams. This was who she was, devotion expressed through cruelty, for the Dark Lord, always. Then everything went wrong. The prisoners fought back. A house elf appeared, Dobby, free, helping Harry Potter. Magic erupted, the chandelier fell shattering where she'd stood. She seized the girl, knife to throat. Stop, or she dies. They didn't stop. The elf snapped his fingers. Impossible, wandless magic tore the girl from her grip, and they were gone. Bellatrix stood amid wreckage, breathing hard, wand raised, knife slick with blood. Harry Potter had been in her hands, and he'd escaped. Rage consumed her, raw, wordless fury. This was failure, unacceptable failure. If they'd been in her vault, if they'd taken the Horcrux, she had to know. She went to Gringotts at once. The goblins hesitated, suspicious, but she was Bellatrix Lestrange. They took her deep into tunnels, past the dragon, down to the oldest vaults. The wards were intact, the protections unbroken, but inside things had been disturbed, moved, and the cup, Hufflepuff's cup, the Horcrux, gone. Harry Potter had broken into Gringotts, into her vault, and stolen the Dark Lord's Horcrux. Something cracked inside her. Not faith, never faith, but fear. Raw and absolute, because the Dark Lord would know, would discover the theft, would hold her responsible, would punish her, unless she fixed it, unless she found them first, recovered the cup, proved her loyalty, her worth, her devotion. She had to kill Harry Potter, had to. May 2nd, 1998. Harry Potter had returned to Hogwarts. The final confrontation. Death Eaters surrounded the castle. Bellatrix arrived with the first wave, blasted through barriers, stormed the grounds, wand raised, laughing. This was it. They would win here, kill Harry Potter, reclaim everything. She fought with abandon, killing curses flying, anyone who crossed her path falling. She moved through battle with manic precision as the castle burned and bodies fell. This was what she'd lived for, fighting for her lord, destroying his enemies, perfect, powerful, his. She saw her niece in the chaos, Nymphadora Tonks, Andromeda's daughter, blood traitor's child, half-blood, married to a werewolf. They'd never truly met. Bellatrix had been in Azkaban while the girl grew up, but she knew what she was. Filth. They crossed paths amid fighting, magic flashing through corridors, smoke and screams and falling stone. Tonks was skilled, an aura, well-trained, but Bellatrix was something else, older, sharper, unrestrained. Their clash was brief, violent, lost to chaos. Later, Tonks lay dead, another body among many, another blood traitor silenced. The black line in her mind was cleaner now. The battle raged into the great hall. Students fell back before her, young, brave, hopelessly outmatched. She toyed with them. This was power. This was freedom. Then one of her curses flew too close. A red-haired girl, Ginny Weasley. The spell missed, barely. Molly Weasley stepped forward, shoved her daughter aside, placed herself between Ginny and Bellatrix, wand raised, face set, eyes burning with something Bellatrix had never possessed. "Not my daughter, you bitch." The words rang through the hall. Bellatrix laughed. A mother, a housewife. "What will happen to your children when I've killed you?" she taunted, circling. "When Mummy's gone the same way as Freddie?" She was enjoying this. They duelled, spells colliding, light and dark crashing. Molly Weasley fought with fury, not elegance, not cruelty, but something raw and unstoppable. Grief, love, the absolute refusal to let her child die. Bellatrix didn't understand it, could not, and that was why she lost. Molly's curse struck her squarely in the chest. For a heartbeat, Bellatrix felt only surprise. Then her body froze, seized. She fell backward, dead before she hit the floor. Her wand skittered across stone. Her laughter vanished mid-echo. Bellatrix Lestrange lay still. After a lifetime of devotion, after Azkaban, after believing herself chosen, she was dead, killed by a mother protecting her daughter. She died as the Dark Lord's regime collapsed. Within the hour, Voldemort himself would fall, defeated by Harry Potter, killed by his own rebounded curse. Everything Bellatrix had believed in, everything she'd suffered for, everything she'd lived for, gone. But she never knew. She died believing they were winning, believing her faith had been justified, believing her Lord would triumph. Perhaps that was mercy. Or perhaps it was the final cruelty. dying without ever knowing how meaningless it all had been. Bellatrix Lestrange left behind wreckage. Frank and Alice Longbottom still alive, still broken, minds destroyed by her hand. Nymphadora Tonks, dead, leaving an infant son. Andromeda Black, alone, the last of her line, raising a grandson in a world her family had tried to burn. She proved that brilliance could become monstrosity, that devotion could rot into madness, that love, when corrupted, was more dangerous than hate. She was a girl raised in darkness, who chose to deepen it, who had every chance to be something else and refused. She served a monster and called it purpose, and in the end, she was exactly what she'd always wanted to be. Perfect in her devotion, perfect in her cruelty, perfect in her faith, and dead on a stone floor, killed by the love she never understood. This was the life of Bellatrix Lestrange, from privilege to prison, from brilliance to madness, from devotion to destruction. She never sought the light, never wanted it, never believed in it. And so she never saw it, not in life, not in death. The battle ends. The castle falls silent. Voldemort lies dead in the great hall. The war is over.